I went ahead and did some research last night about who owns United States bonds. So I'm going to start with bonds today because nobody talks about it. We just kind of hear it and we don't know what it was. Donald Trump freaked out. He didn't quite tell you that he freaked out, but when he put the pause on, the reason he put the pause on wasn't because of a crashing stock market, was because of a crashing bond market. And not only a crashing bond market, but when that happens at the same time with the stock market, it really means big trouble because whenever the stock market falls, people try to find a place to put their money. All right. And everybody tries. And the place that they put their money is what they consider a safe investment. And the United States of America is considered that safe investment. And what is the way to do that? By buying United States bonds. Well, as it turns out, right now, people don't have faith in the United States bonds for several reasons. And we ought to be careful because I went ahead and made this list of all the countries that are holding massive amounts of United States bonds. And I want to show you something here real quick. Japan owns $1.079 trillion of United States bonds. 1 point something trillion. In other words, I think we have like 30 something trillion dollars in debt. Japan, that one country, owns 1/36 of that debt. China is the second largest bondholder of the United States. They own 760 billion. United Kingdom, Britain, UK, Welsh, all those people own $740 billion. Luxembourg, $409 billion. The Cayman Islands, how did they do this? But they own $404.5 billion. Of course, that's from all the crooked money that goes through the Cayman. And Belgium, 377, etc. Why am I telling you this? When people talk about how much power we have and the faith they have in us, because, well, you have faith in this country because we're not going anywhere. We have big military. We have big foremen. We are good for a certain amount of debt that people believe we will service. And as long as the taxpayers are willing to pay all these people who own our debt a piece of the action, they're happy. So we are paying, I don't know, probably 3-point-something% interest. That's a sure thing for all these countries. A sure thing. They know that they can just hold a piece of paper, and every year the American taxpayer gives them almost $1 trillion in revenue just for holding a piece of American paper. And for that, they charge about 3-point-something%. Now, Donald, that's been working fine, but we do need to get our fiscal house in order. But before I continue this line of thinking, because I have some listeners right now that understand that money is a figment of one's imagination, in effect, because again, it's not based on anything, just based on the faith people have in your country. We could have an alternate economic system that doesn't work this way, where money is actually something. I'll explain that in a little bit later. But for those who are going to call and scream at me, or that's going to scream at me in the chat, rest assured, I understand the other concepts of money, the other methodologies we could have. I also understand, as Stephanie Kelton, the great economist, points out, the slack that we normally have in the economy that says how much we can spend over taxes, etc. I get that. But this conversation is restricted to the current economic model that we are in. And everybody out there, this isn't rocket science. The highest level of arithmetic, of math needed for what I'm talking about is arithmetic. The people who sell stocks, the people who sell bonds and all of this, they want you, the average American citizen, to think this is magic and complicated. It is not. It is basic arithmetic. All right? So now, let's leave the stock market aside for now. The stock market is a casino where people gamble on values. In other words, I look at Tesla, and Tesla has lost several $1 billion in the last several days, weeks. But remember, nothing changed at Tesla. So why is it that if you're holding a piece of Tesla stock, did it change in value or anything? Nothing, absolutely nothing changed at Tesla. They're still building crappy cars. They're still not state of the art. None of that has changed in the last 5 years. So they're still a crappy company that has a lot of hype behind it. So we know the stock market is a casino. The bond market isn't. The bond market, on our current context, is real because it can have a material effect on your taxes and your services or your Social Security. And by the way, Social Security owns a lot of bonds as well. In other words, when we go into debt, in other words, as we overspend more than we collect in taxes, some of the folks who buy that bond is Social Security. You know, that 14% that, or actually it's a 12 point something percent that we pay in Social Security for every worker, that goes into buying United States bonds as well. In other words, we're borrowing from Social Security because we still have an overpayment into Social Security until all the baby boomers eventually leave. Then we'll have an underpayment. But anyhow, continuing. I think we're still at an overpayment stage in Social Security. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that one. I think we're still in overpayment mode in Social Security. Anyhow, so there are all these countries who owns a lot of our debt, 30-something trillion, I believe it is right now. Now, we are playing hardball with these folks around the world by throwing tariffs on them. In reality, we're throwing tariffs on the American people. The American people are going to pay a higher price from all these products imported. When Trump says he's putting a tariffs on these countries, he's lying to you. He's putting a tariff on you. So your iPhone that is manufactured in China, for Apple to bring it into the country, they have to pay Trump, the United States government. A large percentage of that price of that phone goes into the treasury as a tax, as a sales tax. And the person who pays it is you. Because when Apple pays that to the government, Apple then comes to you and increase the price of that iPhone to pay Uncle Sam and to ensure that its shareholders and the executives continue to get those substantive checks. So it's always, remember this, it is always you, the working class, who pays. It will always be you, the working class, who pays. To determine how much is who you elect. Now, Donald Trump is causing a diminished amount of product from China and all these places by increasing the prices, right? If the prices of iPhones go up, if the prices of tomatoes, as he's causing tomatoes from Mexico to go up, you are going to buy less Mexican tomatoes. You are going to buy less iPhones. And that is going to mean less revenue. The countries who you buy these things from, they get less revenue. But you know who gets more revenue? Your government, the United States government, gets more revenue. You pay more. The other country gets less, but the United States get more revenue because they are actually coercing you into paying more taxes. You ask yourself, what's the reason? Trump never holds anything in secret. He's like a kid who cannot hold a secret, right? He did this stuff because he wants to give a big tax cut, and he can only give that big tax cut through a process called reconciliation, meaning he cannot change the mechanism of all the laws that have passed that affect the amount of money that he collects. But he does have some powers in that, yes, he has the power, the emergency powers ceded to him by his Congress, Republican Congress, to be in an emergency modal where he then gets the rights to assign tariffs. This is an old man that believes in the past. in the past, when America got all its income from, not from income taxes, but from tariffs. In other words, America only used to collect taxes from the working class. Well, I mean, the rich people buy stuff too, so they pay a little bit, but most of the taxes used to be collected from the working class. What it did is impoverish the working class, because a sales tax is called a regressive tax, a tax that everybody pays at the point that they buy something. There's no breaks. What we have now in America is, well, it gets worse every year, but it's a progressive tax system, which means as you make more money, you pay a higher rate in taxes, which is fair. When you make more money, again, you take more resources. Not only do you take more resources, but you also, it's an aberration in capitalism that allows many who don't work. It allows many who produce nothing to have the higher salaries and income in this country. That's just a capitalism aberration that by design, the guys who designed it made sure to design it for the rich. It is a mechanism that rewards slavery and these other types of social existences. This is not up for debate. We've seen it throughout our history, and we're seeing it now. Now, all these countries, one of the biggest fears, if you notice, Donald Trump fears BRICS, the alliance between Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Their economic prowess. Those actually, it's about 13 countries now that have joined the BRICS, or a bit more. The economic prowess of those countries exceeds those of the G7. You know, the Western countries, their economic prowess is larger. I think, according to Richard Wolff, it's about between 5 and 7% larger. And so Donald Trump and all these guys are playing a game, hoping that these countries together don't react. Because if it becomes all what does MAD stand for? Mass destruction, mutual assured destruction. The ones that lose the most will be the G7, because their population is that much smaller, the G7, than BRICS population. Remember, BRICS has India, which is over 1 billion people. It also has China, over 1 billion people. And I think some of the other large countries are involved as well. What I'm saying is, we are playing with fire. We're playing with what the piece that I was going to play yesterday that I asked you to look, go offline and look at it where I had it in the newsletter. Ray Dalio points out that we are heading not to a recession, but to a depression. And he didn't quite use the word depression, but he knows what he's talking about, because let's postulate here. The bond market has been crashing, it has caused interest rates to go up by over a half point, I believe, interest rates that we would be borrowing at. So we have a huge increase in our budget deficit just from just from the lack of faith in our bonds. That interest rate has gone up, right? Now, if China, who owns $760 billion worth of our bonds, starts to unload some of them, and believe me, if China starts to unload some of those bonds, Japan is going to have to, who is a major holder of those bonds, will have to unload some as well, because they don't want to stay holding money that's worthless, or not worthless, but it's worth a whole of a lot less. They don't want to do that. So it will start to unravel if Donald Trump continues on this path that says, we are going to make sure you all make less money from exporting to the United States. They can come back and say, you want to do that? We are going to charge a premium to you to borrow money from us. And since you want to give your rich taxpayers, or rather not rich taxpayers, your rich people, a huge tax cuts on us, that is exactly what we will do to you. And we can stop that tax cut from occurring today. by simply making sure the part of your budget, which is over $600 billion a year, I think it's over 600 billion, don't quote me on that one, we can make sure that that amount increases by a huge percentage, and you now cannot give tax cuts. In fact, you may have to raise taxes. Look, folks, this is serious stuff that nobody is out there talking about in detail. We are on the edge. We are on the edge of catastrophe caused by our tax cuts, caused by our intransigence with the rest of the world, caused by why we think this 4% of the population that we represent is somehow so much more exceptional than anywhere else. We have a vice president that calls China's peasants. He says we are borrowing from peasants. We have learned how to disregard those who work and reward those who play. Stockbrokers play. Money managers play. We are the ones who work, the farmers, the teachers, the lawyers, the doctors. Those are the ones who perform. Those are the ones who do something for society. When, as we have made those people seem as ridiculously as if not needed, when the ones that are not needed are the ones who make the most, the ones we want to give even more tax cuts to. Folks, we have to start telling ourselves the truth and starting to learn how this current economic system actually works. So the solution to this, again, first of all, is to get rid of these wild tariffs. And tariffs have a place, just not the way Donald Trump is doing. There's a reason to have tariffs in certain areas to rebuild what the fraudulent private sector corporations have failed in. We can actually promote with tariffs, a temporary tariffs, a rebuilding of certain industries that we find from a security standpoint necessary. But all other tariffs should pretty much go way down to where they were before or less. And secondly, we must get rid of any tax cuts for wealthy people. And there is a tax paradigm put out by the patriotic millionaires that we're going to talk about.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.